Without a shadow of a doubt, it's the crooked show in social media history. I want to welcome you to another episode of the War Zone. I got my man Donovan Sadiq on the way. The Queen Demetra K, she on her way too. But I am the 5-star general. The verdict about to pop off in about 30 minutes, 25 minutes. Is they gonna get him or is they gonna let him make it? I say manslaughter in the least, not guilty in the worst. Let's talk about it, man. We're going live. Say, man, I want to welcome you to another episode of the War Zone. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to be by myself. I'm going to be in the building with my man Donovan Sadiq and Queen Demetra K. And they on their way. This is breaking news. They about to unleash the verdict. And it's going to go down. It's going to go down, man. And what we're going to do, we're going to keep you live. Let's go to CNN so we can get a real update of what's going on.
Of the 12 people on the jury, we know that 6 of them are white, 4 of them are black or African American, and 2 of them are bi or multiracial, and that's according to the court. So whatever the conclusion is, it is one that all 12 of these individuals of a diverse jury reached very quickly.
Absolutely. It is a diverse jury. It's even more diverse than if you look at the state and at the county, but more reflective of Minneapolis itself. But you know, the jury pool is a lot larger than just the city. So this is a diverse jury. It is both men and women. You have black folks, you have white folks, you have multiracial folks on this jury. They have been paying attention to, and we should make very clear that this jury was one that was writing notes the whole time, that was looking directly at the witnesses every single time and listening to the closing arguments and opening arguments. So they've been attentive, and now they have a decision.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Let's go now to CNN's Omar Jimenez. He's at George Floyd Square in Minneapolis. That's what they call this area of the city where George Floyd died. Omar, it must be an incredibly somber scene there.
It is, Jake. I mean, we've been talking to people here throughout the day about what this moment means. Of course, we were talking to them before we even knew a verdict was in. And for many of them, the common thread is that what happened to George Floyd is not an end-all be-all, no matter what the verdict is, that this needs to be the beginning of a long-term practice of treating Black people with respect. And this is really what it's all about. When you think about the verdict, and all, of course, we get caught up in all the legal proceedings and the trial and the legalese and what one witness said versus another. What it comes down to was this spot where George Floyd laid under the knee of Derek Chauvin for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, multiple minutes of which he was unconscious for back in May of 2020. It has become a makeshift memorial. It started at this Cup Foods here on the left, of course, with that call over a potential fraudulent $20 bill where we know the cashier who initially wrestled.
So if you're just tuning in, we going live. I'm waiting on Demetra to pop in, Donovan to pop in. You're going to get a real perspective from us. We piped in to CNN, and we're going to give you the verdict live and our commentary on the verdict after it's read. And we'll go from there, man. I mean, if you have been living under a rock, then you clearly don't know the dynamics of what's about to happen. Either way it goes, there is going to be an uproar. If he's guilty and he doesn't get enough time, there's going to be an uproar. If he's guilty, people on the other side are going to be pissed. If he's innocent, then the people on the other side are going to be pissed. So y'all stay tuned in. We're going to let you get some commentary from CNN. I'm waiting on my co-host, and we're going to go from there.
Filmed. One can only imagine how this all would have played out had there not been a preponderance of smartphones in the vicinity. Omar Jimenez, we'll come back to you in a bit. We're told that Derek Chauvin, the defendant, is now in the courthouse. We don't have live pictures of that yet for you, but we'll bring them to you as we do, as the jury is preparing to announce their decision, their verdict. Let's bring in CNN anchor Don Lemon. Don, only about 10 hours of deliberations suggesting that for this jury of 6 white people, 4 African Americans, 2 multiracial people, that it was a relatively easy decision as these things go. What's your reaction?
Well, we don't know. I mean, one would tend to think with.
Hold on, y'all. Let's go back over here. Let's get it back up. That's okay, because we'll get another stream up. Just bear with me for a second. We'll get another stream up, and that's what it's going to be. Hold on, because we going live on this thing. We going live. Hold on a second, my good people. We're getting another stream up. So y'all give me y'all opinion. What y'all think? What do y'all think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? Give me y'all opinion. We're trying to get it up, so bear with me. Let's go here. I know the home station ain't gonna let me down. So just bear with me. We finna get it. We finna get it, man. Here we go. I'm going to get it. Hold on a second. All right, I got us another stream. Let's get it up. I'm getting the stream up, D. Audio.
Much more destructive, a lot more vandalism involved prior to a verdict. So if you're trying to forecast what will happen in the future, there's plenty of passion, particularly following the shooting of Dante Wright. So no shortage on passion.
How you doing, Ms. Demetra?
I'm doing well. I actually just got in the house. Let me turn my light on really quick. You hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I was running errands and all of that and got the notification. I was like, Lord, and my daughter's like, please just turn it down while I'm driving. I don't want to have an accident, please. My anxiety. I was like, okay.
So what do you think? What do you think in your brain, what do you think that's going to happen?
Well, it's hard for me to say what I think is going to happen because I know history. You know what I mean? And so I always said, we expect that he's going to walk. They'll find him not guilty, but hope that they won't. And that's really the best I can do at this moment because I know better. I know better than to get my hopes up, because we're here with George Zimmerman, weren't we? We were here, yes. With the LA PD when they beat up Rodney King. We were thinking, surely, we're going to get some justice. I mean, hell, they were there with Emmett Till when they thought he was going to get some justice. And so we just, I know history. So it's hard for me to say. What you think?
Manslaughter at the worst. I mean, at the least. Not guilty at the worst. I'm praying that based on what I saw, that I know is murder, that you do the right thing. But I'm just like you. I watched the Rodney King, the trial of the Stacey Koontz and them guys, and it was a slam dunk, and they walked. We watched Trayvon Martin. We watched Breonna Taylor. You see what I'm saying? So, my hopes are not that, they're not through the roof. Maybe they might shock us and do what they need to do. But, a lot of people are saying they want 25. I need them to understand that none of these charges, from what I gather, unless I'm wrong, are over 25.
40.
40?
The top is 40 years. If I'm not mistaken, it sounds like two of them, maybe 40 years.
Is that the second and third degree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, it'll be up to the judge, and I don't know. I know they better do right.
And I just want to say this to everybody watching. I know your anxiety is bad. My anxiety is average, I guess. It's because being Black in America, we've been set up for failure. Okay, how I just say that we've been set up for failure, and we've been the underdog by design here in America. And so, and then bringing back I hope they bring back a guilty verdict, and I'm not trying to, be negative, because some people think, oh, you're just being negative. We got to hope for, the best. Yeah, we want to hope for the best, but I just think we need to be realistic. There's some, it could be, and I'm not saying there is, because the verdict is already sealed. They're just waiting for everybody to get to the courthouse, and usually that's why it's taking so long. They usually give everybody about an hour or so, to get there and call everybody and all of that, get situated. But I mean, we know there could be somebody on that jury, because all they need is one. All they needed was one. They being a defense, all they needed was one to say, guys, I don't know. I just can't do it. It's probable that it was his pre-existing. It was the drug use. It was the car exhaust. It was the crowd. Because, the defense threw the kitchen sink approach to everything. They just wanted to throw everything in there, hoping that one of those defenses, if you will, stuck with at least one of those jurors. And so, I don't know. So I'm just telling you that sure, be disappointed, be pissed off, but take action with that. Now, I'm not telling you to do a, Maxine Waters type of thing. Y'all take it as you will.
You ain't got to tell them to do it, because they going to do it.
And I'm not going to do that, because I don't want to be responsible for somebody, getting harmed or, going to jail. But, we can't just keep being mad and then going home, if that makes any sense.
Well, I want to look at it from a different angle. I say that if they don't get it, now we got to put pressure on our politicians. They got to get these laws changed. They got to get qualified immunity out of the building. Regardless of how this happens, it needs to go, regardless. And then these cops would give second thoughts to murdering us wholesalely, like you say. When these types of situations arrive. Somebody asked me, did I make it to Minnesota? No, my flight leaves at 8:20. Hopefully my flight leaves at 8:20.
Right, because that's what I was thinking. Like,
hopefully. But I'm like you. My hopes are not through the roof. I want justice to be served. But, we've been here before. We have been here before, and we have been let down. And then the world continued to evolve. Everything went back to normal. And sometimes that's just the way that the system thinks. Just give it to them. We'll deal with it. We can handle it. And it is what it is. But like you say, it just takes one. I always told people that if I got to end up in a court case, something major, I'm going to the box, because all we got to do is convince one. If we convince one, we can walk. All it takes is one. Hopefully there is none, and my man will get the justice that he rightfully deserves, and we can get on to the next case, which is Dante Wright. But before Dante, you still got the other three that got to go to court in August. So if they don't get this dude, they ain't gonna get the other three.
Right.
That ain't gonna happen.
Right.
That's the way I feel. You can quote me on that one.
Yeah, and I was watching it yesterday, and think it was a prosecution. One of them, they were playing a part of the video. Actually, was a prosecution playing part of one of the body cams, where he was even saying, well, even, you know, the officers there was saying, you know, roll him over to his side, because when you roll a person in handcuffs on their side out of the prone position is what they call it when you're on your stomach with your handcuffs cuffed back to you. When you roll up to your side, that's the recovery position. And so one of the officers did say, basically, are we going to roll him over to the side? And then another officer says, should we check his pulse or something? So they might actually be able to use that in their defense. That at least, you know, I did say roll him over. I did say let's check his pulse. But, you know, they were complicit nevertheless. They allowed, you know, Derek Chauvin, who it sounds like has been written up 22 other times before he murdered George Floyd. And so as I was talking to my daughter on the way back to the house, I said, to me, the bigger issue is, obviously we know, but within the police department, why are they allowing such a rogue police officer to keep his job? Why is he allowed to work after having 22 other complaints, infractions, or whatever it is? Like, why is he considered a valuable cop at this point? And the other part of that is
you get 3 shots at Walmart.
If that, depending on what it is, you know. But he's a police officer out there doing the most. And in 2017, he did the same thing pretty much to a 14-year-old. He knelt on his back, from what they say, until he passed out for like 17 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's his MO is what he does. And unfortunately, his superiors didn't have him on a short enough leash to where they could have, you know, put him in check. And unfortunately, he killed somebody.
Well, I tell you what, you know, the one thing I didn't like is that the police department try to portray that they don't teach this. But if you remember, they teach it all over the country. You know, Constable Darrell Smith out of Fort Bend, you know, Fort Bend, Texas, we got video of him doing the same thing to a suspect.
Well, I think that they don't teach that. I will agree with them that they don't teach that. And what they mean by that is they don't teach their officers to kneel on somebody's neck mercilessly, if I said that right, for nearly 10 minutes.
A fair trial. It's their
I'm just making sure that the video is still.
Oh, I'm watching it too. Yeah, I'm watching it here on my phone just in case. Yeah, so I would agree they probably don't teach that. You know, now we know that there has been in a lot of police departments up until a couple years, give or take, that they allowed the chokehold. You know, like that of New York, where Eric Garner was murdered by that police officer there. You know, so they've outlawed things like that. But I'm not a pro-police person at all, and I just want to say that. But I really do believe them when they say they didn't teach that. They didn't teach their officers to do that. Now, they all admitted, yeah, you know, there are times when you have to elevate the amount of force used and this, that, and the other, but they said they have never taught that in regards to having a man handcuffed in the prone position, helpless, and then kneel on his neck when he is not a threat anymore. So that's what they were meaning by they didn't teach that.
Well, we got about 7 minutes. I'm gonna see what Fox News is talking about.
Okay, I got it up here too, and I'm sure everybody else is watching as well. In case and hello to you guys, everybody. While Gary is checking, if you guys could share it. You know, I know you probably are watching it, but you watch it with us, and so we can kind of just talk through whatever result comes out of this, whether he's guilty, not guilty, or whatever the case is. But you know, I just want to let you guys know. I understand how you feel, you know, with the Monique, how you doing? Say my stomach is in knots. I've seen a couple of people say they are, you know, suffering a little bit of anxiety, which is normal. But, you know, I just think too, don't forget history. When you remember what, you know, the story is for Black people in America, and especially in regards to police brutality and them getting away with it, then use that as your foundation. Okay. I know we're taught to be hopeful, and I think sometimes as Black people, we're taught to be hopeful to a fault. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being hopeful, but to a fault. When I say hopeful to a fault, that means that we are taught to negate history. We're taught to negate the things that we already know to be true. Does that make any sense? So, you know, that's just, you know, I don't even know what to tell you guys because we've seen this story before. Hopefully, it does have a different ending.
Was she's a middle-aged woman, white woman.
Can you hear?
In her 50s.
Can you hear
She showed me images
commentary?
on her phone of the community. She lives at a nearby hospital near 38th in Chicago. She was saddened to see businesses boarded up, burned out businesses from the riots that happened last summer after the May 25th incident. She called Chauvin a knucklehead who just needs to accept the consequences of his actions. She believes that he won't get second degree, that he won't be found guilty of second degree murder. She believes that no matter what happens, that people won't be satisfied with this verdict as well. She worries about her community and feels it's going downhill, wants business owners to be able to open their stores again. So that gives you a little flavor, a little touch of what people here in Minneapolis are feeling. Even after that verdict happens, they're still worried about their community.
I want to go back, Kenneth, thank you. I want to go back to former NYPD Chief of Detectives, Robert Boyce, for a little more on how the law enforcement community is viewing all of this. Because, Robert, we heard the prosecutors say that there's nothing worse for good police than bad police, and how the police are not on trial here. Derek Chauvin is on trial. But we've also heard over the years a lot about the thin blue line and a lot about how law enforcement, the community of law enforcement officers, tends to stick together. So overall, how is the law enforcement community viewing and reacting to this case?
Diane, I think from when this initial happened about a year ago, we took a look at this and I asked everybody in law enforcement that I knew, and everyone to a person, to an individual person, was repulsed by that video. Everyone. And it hurts law enforcement. It hurts our ability to deal with the public. It gives us a bad image. Just this past week, officers were assaulted with Molotov cocktails in New York. So it sends a message that, you know, that now we have to watch out for ourselves, because there's going to be people on the fringes of society who are going to try to hurt us when they see this message. So we are concerned. I don't know anybody who supported that video when they saw it. That was a long trial. And I hope this is a reckoning that this is over, that we're going to move forward and we'll get back to proper, well-trained law enforcement, intelligently executed in the street. So hopefully this is an end of things and we can go forward. I am concerned about tonight, no matter what happens with the verdict or where it goes, and we think we know where it's going now. But I'm still concerned about what might happen later on in my city and cities across the nation.
For all those officers on the street trying to do it right. Let me go to Leah Wright-Rigueur on this question. Leah, there is a lot of talk about reimagining police in America, reconstructing how we approach the issue of public safety. For a long time, perhaps, it did feel to a lot of people as if there was a militarization of our police. And having lived overseas, there's no question we have a very different kind of policing in America, perhaps because we need it. We are a more violent society than they do in other places. But do you think that is actually happening, reimagining policing in America? What might it look like?
Sure. So I think one thing to keep in mind is that the United States is really unique in a lot of regards, in that we incarcerate more people, right, per capita than any other nation in the world, particularly amongst developed nations in the world. We also have a very different kind of policing and police force that is far more violent, I think, than any other nation in the developed world. So we're unique in that respect. What I do think that we are beginning to see, and this actually exists irrespective of the outcome of today's trial, of the Chauvin trial, is that people are beginning to say, I can reimagine, or I can imagine a world where policing is not at the center of how we engage communities. It's not at the center of, or a carceral state is not at the center of how things work within this country. That if we have a social problem, the people that we call shouldn't necessarily be the police, because the police aren't trained in handling these kinds of things. And I think it's not simply the George Floyd moment that drove us there, but instead, in the ensuing months, that were subsequent to the George Floyd moment proved that the United States and policing had a significant problem that couldn't be solved even after a man was killed on television. So I think part of what we're beginning to see is that in a nation that still continues to kill Black people, we have to find imaginative and creative ways to really solve this problem.
All right, Leah Wright-Rigueur, thanks for that. Again, the jury in the trial against Derek Chauvin has now reached a verdict. After 10.5 hours of deliberating, they will determine whether Derek Chauvin will be convicted of killing George Floyd. We're awaiting that verdict now at any minute. Here's David Muir.
This is an ABC News special report. The death of George Floyd. Derek Chauvin on trial. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good afternoon. We're coming on the air at this hour because a verdict has been reached in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Closing arguments, of course, just 24 hours ago from both sides. The jury then given instructions late yesterday. They began deliberating. And again this morning, continuing with those deliberations. And now their decision expected at any moment in Minneapolis. Of course, we know that Chauvin is charged with the death of George Floyd, the country watching, the world watching those images. Chauvin with his knee to George Floyd's neck. It prompted an almost immediate reckoning in this country on race, justice, and policing in America. The prosecution focused on those 9 minutes, 29 seconds, and in their closing argument, reminding the jury of the 9-year-old girl, one of the witnesses, the bystanders, who said she heard paramedics 9 minutes later saying, "Get off of him." They said, "Believe what you see." The defense saying it was about more than those 9 minutes, trying to sow doubt in the jury's minds. The jury deliberating for 10.5 hours, 4 hours last night, 6.5 hours today. Chauvin facing charges of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. We heard his voice in that courtroom when he invoked his Fifth Amendment right last week not to take the stand in his own defense. Today, we learned President Biden called George Floyd's family yesterday. The president suggesting today that the evidence is, quote, overwhelming, and saying, quote, "I'm praying that the verdict is the right verdict." And the president adding he was only sharing those words because he knew the jury was sequestered and had begun their work. About 2,000 National Guard members on duty in Minneapolis, police in cities across the country on alert as well. And our entire team is standing by with us this afternoon as we await the verdict in the trial of that former Minneapolis police officer. I want to bring in our chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams, to start our coverage here. And Dan, conventional wisdom, you know, they say it's made to throw it out. But in this case, there were no questions from the jury, no confusion over the charges, no notes sent to the judge, a relatively short amount of time to deliberate.
Yeah, you have to be very nervous if you're Derek Chauvin right now. First of all, because a hung jury is off the table. We now know that this jury is unanimous. And the fact that they didn't ask questions would again suggest that it's more likely, if you were sort of following the way these things go, that it's going to be the higher the highest charge in this case. Why? Because if it was going to be a manslaughter, let's say, for example, you would expect that there might have been more debate about the definitions and discussions about third-degree murder versus manslaughter, et cetera. For a high-profile case, this is a pretty fast verdict. Some people will tell you, wait a sec, 10 hours plus, that's not so fast. That's true. But in high-profile cases, when the world is watching, the jurors typically want to cross the T's and dot the I's and make it clear to the world that they very carefully considered the evidence. So the fact that they have already come back here with so little coming from the jury has got to be very frightening news for Derek Chauvin right now.
All right, Dan Abrams with us as we await this verdict. Dan, stick with us here. I want to bring Sunny Hostin into this conversation, a former prosecutor herself, ABC News legal analyst, of course, co-host of The View. And Dan makes a good point there, Sunny, about these jurors obviously knowing the weight of this case and that the nation is watching them. And I just want to remind our viewers at home what Judge Cahill said when he was delivering instructions to the jurors. He said, "Do not let bias, prejudice, passion, sympathy, or public opinion influence your decision," and warning them not to consider what consequences their verdict might have. And the fact that they've deliberated for such a short window, what does that signal to you?
Well, conventional wisdom does tell you that fast verdicts hint at agreement. And I will tell you that in all of the cases that I tried, and there were many, especially in the criminal context, what you want as a prosecutor is a fast verdict, because when there are no questions, when there are no clarifications asked by a jury for jury instructions, when you have nothing to read from the jury, a fast verdict like this indicates that there is a full agreement. I am very surprised, actually, that they reached an agreement in such a high-profile case with 45 witnesses in just a little over 10 hours. That is very unusual in a case like this with 12 jurors. Sometimes in a civil case, yes, you get fast verdicts, but in this kind of case, it is very unusual. I actually was expecting many questions. I was expecting some questions about legal clarification, jury instructions, clarifications, and I was actually, David, also expecting what we call the Allen charge, which is, okay, I understand that you are stuck. I understand that there's disagreement, but I want you to go back and do your best and come to an agreement. I was fully expecting something like that, and obviously that did not happen. The jury has reached an agreement. That's unusual.
Sonny Hostin with us this afternoon, Sonny, underscoring that point that there was not one question from the jury, not one point of contention or query to the judge about confusion over any of the charges, which, as Sonny suggests, points to agreement within the jury, obviously, given the short amount of time that they were deliberating. You're looking at a live picture of Minneapolis. We should mention that those images from inside the courtroom, that was during the course of the trial and the closing arguments. There is no live stream yet up and running from that courtroom. And we should also remind all of you at home that the reason there's a live stream in this case is because we find ourselves not only in this moment, this conversation, this racial reckoning in this country, but also in the middle of a pandemic. The judge deciding to make that rare choice to live stream this trial because he knew that members of the community
Ms. Demetra?
So I'm watching it, you guys. I'm watching it on here, and I'm sure you guys are watching it too. Okay. You know, if you go to see if you can share it, PBS Live from Facebook. That's what I'm watching. That's what I usually watch. But so yeah, anyway, we're still waiting for the verdict to come in. It should be coming in any moment from what, you know, everybody keeps saying. So yeah, I mean, I agree with them. That is a pretty fast verdict. You know, considering that it is a high-profile case. Usually, like they said, if it takes a while and they keep going back and forth and with questions and, you know, getting definitions and stuff, it means that maybe they're unclear. Maybe somebody, you know, said, I think he's guilty, I mean, or not guilty, and then the other jurors may, at that point, been trying to convince him or her otherwise. So, yeah, the fact that they didn't ask any questions, like Sonny said, that's pretty telling, I think. You know, we know what we already know what we're gonna say, you know, for the most part. And then the other thing too, they were saying throughout the trial that there were times where the jury wasn't, you know, quite paying attention. Like yesterday, for example, during the defense's closing arguments, the judge, you know, he cut him off in the middle. Eric Nelson, the defense attorney, cut him off right in the middle. It was like, hey, yo, it's lunchtime, and got up. So, you know, we'll be back at this time. And that was pretty much all he said, because at that point, it was taking him like 2.5 hours. He was at the like 2.5 hours mark while he was still giving his closing. And the judge is like, I'm going to lunch. We'll be back, which they said was kind of rare that happens. But the people who were in the courtroom said they noticed that the jury was getting antsy and, you know, not paying attention. And so even a point in the time, at that time, Eric Nelson, the defense attorney, was like, I know I'm being long-winded, because they said that he noticed the jury was, you know, kind of uneasy. Like, yeah, we get it. Okay. So that was pretty interesting. But yes, I know everybody's on pins and needles, and I was reading some of these comments where, let's see. Oh, Sheila, how you doing? And you say positive vibes only. Derek Chauvin will be found guilty in the murder of our loved, he said, George Floyd. I mean, that's what I'm hoping too. I mean, I'm hoping he is found guilty on all of them, not just one of them or two of them. I hope he's found guilty on all of them. You know, and of course, it's a shame that they couldn't get him for murder one, but they have to be able to prove intent. And another thing, you know, was very interesting. And I don't know if you guys noticed, the prosecution never brought up race one time. One time did they ever bring up race. And I believe they didn't bring it up because then the defense would have been able to say, well, prove it. Prove it was because he was black. You know, and then that would have given him an open door to plant doubt into the jury's mind. So it was actually pretty smart for the prosecution to not bring up race. You know, the fact that, you know, black people or black men are killed in the middle of the street or, you know, by police officers often. So it's very smart for them to stay away from that and just keep it, you know, on the things that we could see. And that was that Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd in cold blood. And one of the charges was a depraved heart. And yes, he most definitely has a depraved heart. And the closing, Jerry Blackwell, he did, for the prosecution, he did the cross direct, I guess you can, in his closing arguments. It says, you know, that Derek had a very small heart to do what he did to George. And then also in the prosecution, their closing arguments, prosecutor Steve, because I can't pronounce his last name, he says, notice how Derek was so unbothered. How he was so unbothered when he was just picking rocks out of the tire as he's kneeling on his neck. Like, this tire looks like it has a rock in it. Let me go ahead and, you know, pick it out of there as he's completely
and
murdering.
For me, when you say that, I feel that he had done it before to somebody else. He was comfortable. I've always said he was very, very comfortable with what he was doing. He had his hand in his pocket. He had his hand in his pocket. No regard for human life. He had his hand in his pocket. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, he was very comfortable. Now, it is known that he'd done it before to a 14-year-old in 2017. So it was just how he got down. But, you know, the prosecution made it a point to say he's gotten away with it. And he just knew that he would get away with that. You know, even with Big Brother everywhere, the cameras in the sky, the stores, their body cams, the dash cam, and the people recording. He was so comfortable believing that he would get away with it. Like, well, you know, I was going to say he was resisting because you guys heard the defense's argument. He was resisting. And I loved how the prosecution took mastery of their closing arguments and they broke it down. They said, well, he was complying. He was just saying, I'm claustrophobic. You know, I'll even get in the front seat. Can you just give me a minute? I'm going to do it. Give me a minute. So they said he had complied all the way up to the time, really, that they were trying to put him in the car. And then they also said, look how small the back seat of that car was. It said, George is a big guy. And so it says it makes sense that he was going to have some issues fitting in that car. Now, per the chief and all the other police witnesses that came forward, they said that Derek was trained in crisis management, if you will, and that would have been a crisis. Somebody is having a hard time getting in the car for whatever reason. They said that he was trained in how to deal with that. And so for him to do what he did to George was excessive force because that was not needed. He was already in the handcuffs, even when he was sitting down by, I guess, the Dragon House, what they call it, the restaurant, and they walked him. He was handcuffed the whole time. And so there was no need to escalate it. But now this is what I think a lot of people forgot. A lot of people forgot that George and Derek used to work together. They had a side job as security guards at a nightclub or a bar or something like that. And so was there some motive there? Did Derek have an issue with George from that point? Recognize who he was as like, okay, I'm going to stick it to him.
I'm gonna tell you something. That when you know somebody from somewhere else, you're not just gonna do that. You're gonna back off. You're not just gonna do that. I mean, you had my issue with all of this is you had him handcuffed. He was subdued. Why was it necessary to continue to keep your knee on his neck? You had him handcuffed. And see, in the state of California, that's a violation of Penal Code 1264, cruel and unusual punishment that's injurious to an inmate's health. When you have him handcuffed, you got to back off at that point. You have to back off at that point. And he did not back off. He was very, very comfortable. That's the evilness that I saw in him being comfortable. The evilness is something I'll never forget. And a lot of people don't know, but in the city of Houston, I broke this story. I broke this story. You know, nobody knew what had happened. And I called my friend Dion Hollins, you know, who was at Yates during that time with George. And Dion was like, "You gotta be kidding." I'm like, no, dude, this just happened. And well, we gotta say the war zone broke the story, especially in the city of Houston, because the state of Minnesota, as well as the city of Minneapolis, has the history of murdering people by the hands of the police. This is not uncommon in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've met at least 12 to 13 people whose family members have been murdered by the Minneapolis Police Department. Murdered by the Minneapolis Police Department. So people have to understand that right now, like the minister says, justice or else. If it ain't no justice today, you're going to deal with it or else. You're going to deal with it. But that's the chickens coming home to roost. You know, and I just, you know, hopefully it does what it needs to do. Let me double check. Are they not saying anything yet?
Yeah, this is how they usually do. It's they're waiting for the judge to, it sounds like everybody else is there except for the jury and the judge. So, but once they are seated and stuff, then they'll show the judge and all of that. Yeah, because this is what I usually watch if I'm not at my TV. I usually watch this particular.
So I don't hear anything. So is that normal?
That's normal. Yeah, they don't talk with, okay. Unless somebody's the judge or somebody's deliberating. I'm not deliberating, but delivering their case.
So if you guys are just tuning in, it's the War Zone, a special edition. We're going live with the verdict. We appreciate you guys taking the time out to tune in with us as you normally do every single day. And I know you asked me earlier, will I be able to do the show tonight? If I got to do it from the airport, I'm going to do it. So, you know, my flight doesn't leave until 8:20. You goddamn right we're going to get it on. We're going to get it on tonight, man. You know, but we got to fix the United States of America, especially for Black people. We have to figure out some things because these youngsters are not our ancestors, man. They're not our ancestors. And, you know, I want to applaud everybody that's standing up for justice. White, Black, Latino, Somalian, you know, it's just time to stand up for what's right. And some days you got to go through hell to get to heaven. You're going to go through hell to get to heaven. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, right now we're in the middle of hell. Let's see how we can do. And hopefully we end up in heaven when this verdict is ready. Do you think this verdict reading and all of this is bigger than, say, the Rodney King trial for those officers and maybe the OJ trial?
It's funny because people keep asking me that if I think this is bigger than the OJ trial, because, you know, the OJ trial was considered the trial of the century. And Rodney King, I would say this is bigger because, and really probably only because there was a cell phone, there was footage. Now, when OJ did allegedly, now he was found not guilty. If it don't fit, you must have quit, okay? There was no video and all of that. The only thing we saw was the white Bronco going down the freeway, right? And with Rodney King, yes, we did see the videotape, but there was some argumentation as to its authenticity, and did we see what we really saw? But this here, with George Floyd, there was various cameras everywhere, the body cam, many angles, right? And so the whole world got to see it was, what happened. Everybody got to see it. And so not only did we get to see it, because even with the Rodney King video was kind of grainy, and you did see the officers with the batons and everything, but this was up close and personal of a black man being lynched, literally being lynched in the middle of the street by not the KKK in the roads, because we know that the KKK is the police department. But we saw police officers in all of their uniforms lynching a man. It was, getting nighttime, but hell, it was daytime, you might as well say. We saw the police officers doing that to him. The world did. And as you know, last year, the world caught fire, literally, due to what was done to him. And so, yeah, I think this is bigger because everybody got to see it. Like, I would say, unless you're just an asshole, everybody who saw that video came to the same conclusion, that it was flat out murder. And check this out. Even the chief of police, his boss, a couple days later penned a letter and said that was flat out murder. His boss. Usually they are all on the same page. Well, we got to investigate and see if we make sure. And he said, no, that was flat out murder. In fact, one of the other expert witnesses from the police department there, he actually was longest serving to this day, the longest serving police officer at that department. Him and 13 other officers penned a letter that was titled, "This is not who we are." And they completely condemned the actions of Derek Chauvin and the other officers. And so I say this is bigger because everybody saw the same thing. Everybody.
BJ Trotter says, I believe is guilty, nothing else can be found. Now, as African Americans, we normally will settle for a little bit of nothing. Guilty means nothing to me. It's what comes with it. It is what comes with it. And if there is not enough time given, then the guilty verdict is for what? We can't just be satisfied with a guilty verdict. We have to be satisfied also with the sentence. What you think?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, there are minimums, and I'm not quite sure what they are. I would imagine he had to do some jail time, right? But there's a minimum. Like, he can get a slap on the wrist, which is what we normally see police officers get in the rare case that they are found guilty. They get a minimum. So I think anything, for me personally, I know the top is 40 years on, I think, 2 of those counts. Anything less than 40 years, I mean, I'd like to see the dude get life. And you're taking a step further, I'd like to see him get whatever they got, the needle, the electric chair, the gas chamber, whatever I would like to see him get that. But, you're absolutely right. Just because he's found guilty don't mean his ass won't be out in a couple of years. I mean, look at Amber Guyger there in Dallas. She's doing 6, maybe 5 years or something like that, and probably get off sometime served. It's a nightmare.
Well, that's the thing. How much time will he get if he's convicted? I'm ready for it, man. Let's do it. Man, the judge need to come on up out of there playing with himself under his robe. He bring his ass on up in there and let's get it on, man. Because once he come in there, they ready. All they got to do is call a jury.
Well, I think, too, what we got to remember is, so I'm sure they're ready to give the verdict, but they got to make sure all the ducks are in a row outside of the courthouse, because depending on what verdict they render, the Minneapolis and a lot of other places in, I would say the world are not going to be okay. So they probably got to make sure they ready for whatever. Now, also, you know, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the militia out there said that regardless of what the verdict is, they're going to turn up, and Black people need to beware. So
I tell you what, turn up, motherfucker. But some of us like Bernie Mac, we ain't scared of it. We ain't scared of you. Because like my mama would say right now, when they made your gun, they didn't stop making them. They didn't stop making them, but you got to keep your head on a swivel. You got to keep your head on a swivel, man. So I'm like you. We got to see what's going on, because this could pop all over the world.
oh, it's going to. And, you know, think about this. Just as we want Derek to be found guilty on all charges, there are a lot of people. I mean, hell, the union raised $1 million. They raised $1 million for the defense of a man who lynched a man in the middle of the street. Okay, so just like we want him to not be guilty, there's a lot of people, I mean, for him to be guilty, there's a lot of people who don't want him guilty, and they're going to see that him being found guilty as a slap in their face of white supremacy and, you know, blue lies. Now, it should also be said that they did throw him over. They say the blue wall of silence. I say the blue wall of violence. They threw him over that wall. They say, here, y'all can have him. But there are a lot of people who are not going to agree with a guilty verdict, because they consider, well, listen, white supremacy, one thing they do well is that they stay on code. Regardless of what they do to your Black ass, they stay on code.
Well, I see my big brother Boumani Nafari out in St. Louis. So I'm looking at my man Shamar Davis. He say Charleston is getting ready. I already know Boumani got St. Louis on lock. You know, Central Region, new Black Panther Party. So, you know, if they think it's a goddamn game, man, you know, some of us is ready, man. We've been ready since the day it happened. And, you know, it is what it is. We don't want no problems. We don't want no, you don't want no smoke, baby. Because if they want some smoke, I'm going to tell you like this here. Dimitri, they're going to think it's a turkey leg hut in every major city in America with all this smoke. You going to find out then that Black people ain't scared of y'all. Now, what we need to do, just like, you know, when you try to overturn the government, you know, take your L. If you get an L in this, take your L and go home. But ain't nobody finna play. I know they ain't finna play up in St. Louis. They ready. They ready. Charleston, South Carolina, they ready. Shit, they ready in Louisiana. So, you know, it is what it is, man. Everybody, I don't care what you're doing right now. I know these people to stop what they doing. They sitting in front of a TV somewhere. And this is going to change the course of history in the United States of America.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, you know, God forbid a not guilty verdict comes back. It is going to be a huge blow, an even bigger blow, I should say, to the Black community, because it just lets the world know, and everybody else knows, that you could do whatever you want to do to them, including murder them in the middle of the street. But the question needs to be,
it's not just murder them in the middle of the street. Murder them in their motherfucking house.
Well, I'm talking about,
sleeping.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about specifically, you know, with this case. But I think what we need to ask ourselves as Black people, so what do we do about it? Now, what do we do about it past, you know, protesting and tearing up something here or there? What do we do, you know, to change that? Because we can burn everything down and all of that, where it's not a store left. And I guarantee you, right after the smoke clears, we'll hear of another Black man, woman, child being lynched by the police. So what are we going to do? Are we going to organize? Are we going to get on the same page? Are we going to stop spending our money with people who don't look like us, who don't like us? Like, what are we really going to do about it? Not this, because I always tell people, don't call me to come march with you. Don't call me to come do no Negro chants, because I'm not going to. Because the way I want to do it is change it, the way we do things. Because when we change the way we do things, then the system will have no choice but to stop slaughtering us wholesale in the middle of the street. But what white supremacy is going to say, what y'all going to do? They expect for us to get out there and protest and somebody to burn something down. And of course, as they say, y'all loot. They expect for us to do that. Those buildings and those stores, they got insurance. Some of those stores want to be burnt down so they can take the money and go open up something else, go buy something else in your neighborhood. But the question is, what are we going to do?
Well, I know what they ain't did. They done laid around here and burn up all the motherfucking buildings, and they ain't burn up that child support building. Man, take your ass over there and burn up that motherfucker, man. For real, man. That's showing love to the blacks, the whites, the Somalians, all of us that's been fucked around by that system. But I think you burn the system down by getting these people out of office that can go into these state houses, into Congress, and change the goddamn laws. If this does not happen today, every motherfucker that makes a law should lose their goddamn jobs.
Well, I mean, in no shade to anybody, and I'm not trying to come off this way, but we had somebody on here last night and they took a private jet. They took a private jet to Minneapolis to do what? Where did you go there? Sheila Jackson Lee and, the sister of George Floyd and Dr. Matthews, she was on here, and I don't know who else went. They went with an entourage, if you will. What did you go for? What are you doing there? Are you there to actually do something? Are you there to just give little sound bites and little photo ops of you being there? Because she said if it jump off, they out of there. So you wasn't there to really get down in the first place.
I'm going to tell you like this here. You used to watch them cartoons, Speedy Gonzalez, huh? If this shit go wrong, they out the motherfucker before they finish reading the verdict. They on the runway because they know what's finna pop off. It's gonna pop off. But yeah, I agree with you. Why did you go? What was the purpose? I look at a lot of things that we've been doing since this happened. The marching, the protesting, the chanting, the slab rides. I mean, all this shit ain't stopped nothing. But this is what we do. And all of us show up to that bullshit for what? No, what you need to do is get with one of your nationalist groups and let's see what the fuck we need to do. Because it's more of us, but like Dr. Muhammad teaches us when he come on, it's more of us. We just not as organized as them.
Yeah, and until we do that, we are going to continue having live feeds of verdicts of police officers murdering Black people and, your George Zimmermans and, folks like that getting away. We're going to continue to do that until we really just get on the same page in every way that we can think of. We'll continue to talk about it. And you guys already know me. I'm tired of talking about it, to be honest with you. Sometimes I just don't even want to talk about it anymore. Sometimes I just want to say, because I talk to everybody around me. I touch and I talk to them about what it is we need to be doing. So I feel like I kind of have that on lock. And sometimes I just want to come inward and say, I'm just going to talk to my people. But I know that they're okay. So we need to talk to other people who maybe don't know. But it's after a while, you just get tired of talking and just wish. Like I hurt for Black people. I hurt for my people because we are the greatest to ever do it. You fill in the blank what it is. We are the greatest to ever do it, but we don't act like that sometimes. We continue to grovel. Like right now, we're all sitting here waiting for them to deliver us justice. And that same them are the ones who made sure that Black people don't get any justice. They didn't bring us over here for justice, but we're still here waiting. Oh gosh, I hope they give us justice. So what? So they say he's guilty. Then we go home. Then we say, whoo, oh, we go home and we forget about the things that really plague our community. What do we do? Even if he's found guilty, we still need to get to the table with a plan and then execute that plan as Black people. Don't get complacent. Don't fall asleep. Just like with Joe Biden, Black people fell asleep. Oh, we got Trump out of there. Okay, here we go. It's on, y'all. Y'all, it's late on this feed, but I'm looking at on my feed. So here it goes.
Thank you. Please be seated. All rise for the jury. All right, please be seated. Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict. Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1. Court file number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 89, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 91, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts? So say you one, so say you all.
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy duty jury service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer questions and to advise you further. So all rise for the jury. All right, be seated. With the guilty verdicts returned, we're going to have Blakely, you may file a written argument as to Blakely factors within 1 week. The court will issue findings on the Blakely factors, the factual findings, 1 week after that. We'll order a PSI immediately returnable in 4 weeks. And we will also have a briefing on, after you get the PSI, 6 weeks from now, and then 8 weeks from now, we will have sentencing. We'll get you the exact dates in a scheduling order. Is there a motion on behalf of the state?
Your Honor, the state would move to have the court revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. Anything further?
All right. Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Counsel, Gates, I can send you.
I tell you what, one of the best things that I saw, one of the best things other than those 3 guilty verdicts, was them putting that motherfucker in handcuffs and walking his ass out of there to sit his ass in jail until they sentence him. That was one of the, like, when they said his bail was revoked, I was like, y'all saw me, you know.
Yeah, you were a little bit ahead of us,
yes.
So we could tell the verdicts before. But I mean, it's a good day. But you know, you got you guilty, but we got to wait 8 weeks. We got to wait 8 weeks to see what they actually give it.
That's okay. His ass ain't going nowhere. I'm right now. Let's take baby steps. I'm glad that his ass is, you know, no longer free to go home and eat what he wants to eat, to go watch what he want to watch. And I'm glad that he has to sit his ass in prison and let all of that marinate, that his ass is going to do some time. Now, I doubt very seriously, I'm hoping that they give his ass the max on all counts. I hope that they do, because the fact that that jury came back and guilty on all of them says that they saw what we saw. They saw what we saw. There was no ands, there was no ifs, there was no gray area. It was black and it was white. Okay, it was just straight up murder. There was, you know, like I said, I watched the whole thing, and I understand his defense attorney has to do what he needs to do. It's his job. They paid him $1 million to try to get him off. But as I'm listening to his defense, I'm like, is this cat serious? For real? Because even the prosecution, all of their witnesses were like, and I can't remember which doctor it was, but it says, yeah, he had a little heart disease, but it would be one hell of a coincidence to say that he decided at that moment that Derek Chauvin kneeled on his neck to die of heart disease, you know? And they said with the car exhaust, we don't even know if the car was on. What are you talking about? So he tried, but he couldn't defend that. He couldn't.
Right, but even if the car was on, the man is in custody, and you've got to have care at that time. So you're going to keep a man near an exhaust pipe that for a car that might be running. So that whole thing didn't make sense to me at the time. But glad to be on the show. I rushed over here as quickly as I could. You know, whenever we talk about race soldiers, I was in the VA, and we talk about race soldiers. I'm telling you, the comments that were coming from the VA reps, I'm talking about these Vietnam vets and stuff like, oh, it was unbelievable. It was just like, oh, well, you know, he shouldn't.
he shouldn't resisted arrest. He should, it's like, what does that have to do with the man being murdered? Warrants or whatever. It has nothing to do with a man being murdered. And it's just amazing. But here's my thing. I was listening on the way over, and, all these people are excited. And yes, I'm happy that what has happened. But you got to remember now, and we said this last year, we said this on the show last night, these officers are now going to start going and depending on the judges to give them lenient sentences. Okay, they're going to go to the bench. That is why it is very important that your local judges and all that other stuff that's at the local level, that you guys pay attention to who's running for judge. It's very important that you guys stop trying to avoid jury duty and get your butts down there and serve jury duty so that we get the right verdicts. But real quick at the end, now that this is done, everybody's dancing in the streets. You got the barbecue grill going, bus stopping, and doing all that great stuff, right? What does that change? I mean, we've won the battle, but there's still a whole war to go on. So, like I said, I'm happy of the verdict, but the point of the matter is, until there is legislation and the culture of the police is changed, we got a long way to go, because you got another trial coming up with the Dwayne guy. You still got Breonna Taylor. I mean, we got all of these things that we still have to do. I'm not saying don't be happy. I'm saying keep your eye on the prize.
I just, for a moment, I want to be able to bask in the fact, I'm telling you, I hope that shot of him getting led away in handcuffs, it makes Time magazine. I hope it makes all the newspaper covers. I hope it makes everything. I hope those handcuffs and the handcuffs of the prosecution become person of the year. I really do. Because, Time has the person of the year thing. And I hope those handcuffs and the prosecution become person of the year, because like I said, I watched the whole thing from beginning to end, and that prosecution team took mastery of that case, and they left the defense attorney really nowhere to go. I mean, they brought up stuff they knew he was going to bring up. They brought up the drug use. They brought up everything they knew he was going to bring up, and what can he do? Like, they completely stole his thunder. I mean, they had the timelines, they had the graphs, they one time in the classroom, because that's what it was like in the courtroom. We went to science class. The doctor broke everything down so we could understand it. And so they left the defense. And then the other thing too, people were wondering this. Why didn't he have any help? He didn't have any help. The prosecution had 3 to 4 people, and they was just rope-a-doping them. It was one point that the defense attorney, he was like, "Oh, it's been a long day." It was like, well, why don't you have any help? They said he had a paralegal, but she couldn't, really help him. But he was just outdone, not just because the prosecution was good at their job. He was outdone because the facts spoke for themselves. And that video really whooped his ass even before the court proceeding started. So
yeah, well, remember, we've got 3 more cases coming down with the other officers involved. So if this is the blueprint to what happened to this guy who actually did the murder, the other guys are going to fall right in line. But, when you're saying firsts and things like that, I'm with you. Let's bask in it for what it is. But do you want to really know what I thought really turned the court case totally against him? When those police officers crossed that blue line, when the senior officers crossed, the chief crossed, and they said, "No, this isn't us." The trainer, all of the officers that crossed that line and said, "This ain't us." I think that really was telling, because when your own organization is like, and I love this about the prosecution, what they did. They didn't make it a police versus, Derek, versus everybody else thing. They made Derek Chauvin basically an anomaly within the police department. Like, no, he did this. This is not in the training. This isn't what good police officers do. So, big ups to the prosecution. But and at the same time, I'm going to say the prosecution should be skilled at what they do. They spend a hell of a lot of time prosecuting us for little or no nothing. And, again, so that's a little funny thing there, D. So I'm just throwing that in there. But anyway, you know what I mean.
Well, I'd say this here. We got one win under our belt, and I'll let D bask in the guilty verdict and them putting him in the handcuffs. It's all about what happens at sentencing. It's all about that. And see, me, I think long term. And, I won't celebrate until that happens. So, as we normally do, I wear the colors faithfully, bro. Where we from is what it is. That's what George represented, Third Ward, Texas. And I know my people down in Third Ward feeling real good right now, and it's a beautiful thing. But how impactful, especially at sentencing, and he will automatically appeal it. How impactful is what Maxine Waters did? Because if he can appeal it and use that as a means, it may get overturned.
I mean, he can try to appeal for anything, but he has to prove that that the jury was influenced. He still has to be able to prove that in order to get appeal. Now, will he get an appeal? Yeah, sure. Most people do get an appeal, but will he win that appeal? That's the thing. And the other question is the police union, now that he's completely thrown over the blue wall of violence, are they going to spend that kind of money again to get him off? I mean, he's a defunct. They all defunct, if you ask me. But police officer who no longer has a job, he has been found guilty on 3 charges. Are they going to spend that kind of money to get him off? I think that's really, what we have to ask. And, it's going to take him some time to get an appeal. He's at least going to sit behind bars for a while. Hell, and we got the coronavirus going on. And see, he's going to be there for a minute before he gets to appeal. But I just think really today, we should celebrate, because my phone is going crazy, y'all. My daddy is calling me, my brother. He says, all right, great. They got him. Now let's go home and work on our shit. And he's right. Let's celebrate today. Hell, maybe celebrate tomorrow. But after that, we do need to come up with a plan. Like, how are we going to avoid sitting here again celebrating over a guilty verdict over a racist ass police officer that decides today he wants to kill a nigga?
Well, like I always tell you, if I was going to jail, I would go in there as a double Muslim. Do not be surprised that Mr. Chauvin will go in there with the white Aryan nation to protect them, because I'm very sure Ray and Pookie and all those guys that he messed with is going to be awaiting him that are aware of his trial. He
don't really have to worry about that. They're not going to put him in Gen Pop. They're gonna keep him in SEG and keep him away from everybody. That's automatic with a cop. They're not, he would have to do 10 to 15 years before they even consider putting him in Gen Pop. So now he'll probably go crazy and SEG, but it is what it is. I mean, the devil got his just due today. The devil got his just due today. But I just want y'all to understand, I got to get up out of here and I got to make it to the airport. So we'll do the show. I'll be in the airport. But the game gets interesting right now. It gets interesting right now. The state of Minnesota is loaded with militias, and they've already made their threats. So now, do they follow through on their threats? You black nationalist groups out there, you either gonna protect the hood like you say, or we gonna shut your ass down. And that's all it boils down to. Time for you to step up and do what you need to do. If you're walking around here with these uniforms on and you're open carrying and you're legal to carry, protect the hood right now, because somebody's gonna be a victim of the bullshit. It's gonna happen somewhere. So it's time for y'all to step up to the plate And more importantly, y'all stay running to them gun ranges and all that bullshit. Say, man, if you got to spark that thing, you got to spark that thing, bro. That's all it boils down to. So I'm going to check out because I got to get ready to get to the airport and head back to Minneapolis. But Dr. Matthews, them probably popping champagne. And for once, Crump, you got a win under your belt. But we still ain't impressed, motherfucker. We still ain't impressed. We still dealing with Dante Wright in the same city. So with that being said, if y'all good, my friends, we're going to check out, y'all. We'll be back at 7 o'clock. It's the war zone. Ain't nobody do it like us, bro.